Hi, I'm Clay Dawson. I've run 3 sub-2:30 marathons in 7 weeks this year, and you're listening to the Physical Performance Show.
Failure is not an option.
I've had my ups and my downs.
I think it's an absolutely breakthrough experience.
Welcome to the Physical Performance Show, the show designed to inspire the pursuit of your physical best performance. I'm your host, Brad Beer. Listen in as we delve into how the world's top physical performers achieve their success, as well as the highs, the lows, and the journey of getting there. Let's get ready, set, let's go.
Listeners, welcome to another episode of the Physical Performance Show. This is, in fact, the last episode for 2017. If you've been with us on the journey this year, a massive thank you for your support. If it's your first time today, then welcome to the show, and I hope you enjoy some of the archives from the program. Today's guest is Clay Dawson. This year I've had multiple listeners feedback and say that it'd be great to hear from some age group athletes who are doing some really remarkable things. So listeners, I've listened, we've listened, and in fitting with that, today's guest is a great candidate. Clay Dawson is a high school art teacher hailing from Ipswich. He's an accomplished runner, very accomplished in fact. This year in 2017, Clay ran a phenomenal bout of marathons. He ran 3 sub-2:30 marathons, 2 hours and 30 minutes, across 6 weeks, starting with the Gold Coast Marathon, 1 month later running the Brisbane Marathon, which he won, and then 2 weeks later winning the Sunshine Coast Marathon. So 3 marathons, sub-2:30 each across 6 weeks. It's a remarkable achievement. But in today's episode, Clay takes us through how it didn't always appear to be that way. Clay was, in his words, very overweight as he undertook his university studies, and at that point had no interest in running. So this is a really fun look into someone's journey that I hope everyone can relate to. While we aren't all going to run 2:30 marathons, I think the principles, the persistence, and the story that Clay shares will really land home with listeners. So I hope you enjoy this episode. Let's jump straight in with Clay Dawson. Oh, I've been looking forward to this one. Clay Dawson joining us today. Clay, firstly, what an incredible year, and we're going to dive into this. 3 marathons in the space of, really, what do we got? 8 weeks or whatever it ends up being. 3 sub-2:30 marathons.
I think it was 7, actually.
7 weeks. Just phenomenal, and we want to pull that apart. But first, let's do something a bit fun. What's one thing that scares Clay Dawson?
Oh, look, see, I've been a long-time fan of the podcast, so I've had a good deal of dwelling on this question because I know you always start with it. But I was thinking of, if you want to go the easy answer, you could say snakes. And there's this time of year and it's nice and hot in Queensland. There's plenty of those out. But if you want to go a bit deeper, I'd like to say, well, kind of with my journey at the moment, the whole running thing, I was pretty late to the sport. And I think of it kind of like everything really surprises me at the moment. So it's like I don't know if you grew up with those Choose Your Own Adventure books.
Yep, I remember those.
Yeah, where you'd sort of read a section and then you'd make a choice and choose one way or the other, and you'd, wind up with all kinds of scenarios. I guess the thing that scares me the most is probably running out of pages.
Running out of pages? You want more adventures?
Yeah, the uncertainty of life, or the uncertainty of sport, or the uncertainty of anything really being taken away from me. I think that scares me a bit.
Yeah, I think that's particularly something once you become a parent, right, Clay? You got your beautiful boy, too, Jasper, and your beautiful wife, Michelle, and doesn't that put another slant on life when all of a sudden you've got this little being that you're responsible for?
Holy cow, yeah, and it adds another dimension to training. I mean, I don't consider myself a super elite athlete by any stretch of the imagination, particularly given some of the amazing athletes you've had on the podcast, but it certainly adds I don't want to say a spanner in the works, but another dimension to training and obligations and, to life in general.
Clay, you said something there that I think is really interesting. You were late to the sport of running. Can you take us through your genesis story, Clay? How did you get started pulling on a pair of runners, and at what point did you realise that you just classified yourself as not an elite athlete, but those that know your performances will put you in the elite category squarely and fairly? Mate, how did you get started in running? What's your background story here?
Oh, well, I grew up as sort of more of a huskier young man. I played a lot of baseball through high school and was never really athletic. Certainly, I think I made the state high school cross-country team barely. I think they took the first 7 runners, and there were probably about 9 in my age group. So, I barely scraped in. So there was no running talent really back then that was evident. But while I was at uni, I was sort of on holidays, and I saw this market research opportunity come up, and they were asking for obese males. And what the thing was is you got to basically they gave you a full fitness analysis, and you got to run on the machine with the VO2 max and all this really cool looking stuff that I'd seen on television and always wondered about. And I applied, and they said, "You're perfect." So I think that was a big light bulb moment that I probably should start doing something.
And how old were you at that stage, Clay, in years?
Oh, that would have been, maybe mid-20s, I think. I'm not sure. It was, around the time of university.
And so you were a bit of a junior runner, like you did some cross-country and things, but no real serious sporting commitment or serious sporting highlights as a kid growing up.
Oh, absolutely not. Yeah, literally in terms of cross-country for school, I'd go for one run about a week before the event, or maybe a couple of days before the event. There was no training whatsoever throughout the year, so it was 365 days of nothing, bar for 2 runs, one before the event and one on the event, and that was about it.
nothing like cramming training, eh?
Yeah. So I was a minimalist trainer, to say the least.
And Clay, just to make sure we don't lose the magnitude of this, so you put your hand up for an obesity study. At this point, you were doing no exercise at uni. You were just getting through your exams, and obviously you're a qualified high school teacher. That's the degree you were studying, teaching. But put us in the framework. Were you overweight by much or a little? Or I mean, they've classified you as obese. Did you think that was a fair categorisation of your fitness status?
I guess to some degree I must have somehow known because I applied for it, but I always just sort of considered I was that huskier sort of person, that thicker set guy, like I'm sure a lot of people out there think. And I didn't think even if I became skinny, I wouldn't be anything but a bigger guy, if you know what I mean. So at the end of the survey, when I got the big printout back, it said, I think at that point in time I was 118 kilos.
And what do you weigh now, Clay, for race weight?
Well, it's a little bit into the off season, but my racing weight at the moment's about 68 kilos.
I mean, that's how's the maths here, Clay? That's 50 kilos. Is that right?
Yeah.
50 kilos.
Yes.
That's a whole human. And Clay, you said that you got your VO2 max tested in this study. Can you remember what your number was back then?
I can't remember, I'll be honest. It'd be buried somewhere on my computer because I did keep the files and I kept the printout somewhere. I think I was more mortified by the big glowing bar graph that said that I was obese.
So what happened then? So you had this realisation. You'd had no, means, no serious runs on the board as a junior athlete. You just sort of hacked around, did a few cross countries, a run before it, and then the event itself. I mean, what happened from then? When did you first really put a pair of shoes on with intent to go for a run?
Well, that was almost serendipitous as well, because I sort of went from there and decided I'd just tool around during the university breaks. The place where I lived had a little mini gym. You could barely call it that, but there was some equipment there, and I thought, I'll play around on that for a little while, and just even talking about it now, I don't think that I really honestly thought it would do anything. But then the gym equipment broke, and I thought, well, I might go for a run. And I ran around the block, and then I ran a bit further, and then I ran a bit further. Never any thought about racing or how fast I was going. There was certainly no GPS watches or any of that technology or anything really involved. It was purely just I started enjoying the run. Yeah, and that became a daily thing, and that's literally how the weight dropped off.
And how many years ago are we talking about? How many years ago, Clay?
Oh, yeah, it'd be tough for me to put an exact date on it. I'd like to think it was around 2004, 5 maybe.
So we're sort of talking, 13 years ago. So you started to recreationally jog, build the bridge, Clay, to help us understand how in 2017 you can run 3 sub 2:30 marathons inside 7 weeks. So what were the major sort of stepping stones? Have you run continuously for the last 13 years, or have you had a bit of an on-off affair until recent years with it?
No, it's been pretty consistent, and a large degree of that, once the weight dropped off as well, was just a sort of, as a self-diagnosed sort of mental sort of, crutch as well, I guess. It's something that I found leveled me out and kept me really happy, and helped me be the better version of myself. But the real moment was when my now wife and I, we took a teacher exchange over to Canada, and we went to a place called Campbell River, and we met these absolutely amazing outdoor lifelong friends now. And our motto when we were on the plane over there was to say, if this was going to be our year of yes, so if someone asked us to do something, instead of being the humble, reserved people and say, oh no, that's okay, we were going to go, yeah, sure, let's do it. And that changed both of our lives forever, I think.
So best on that there, Clay, 2 things. You said running kept you happy. What do you mean by that?
I mean, yeah, I find that, I don't think there's anything. It sounds a lot more sinister than it probably is, but I have had moments, I guess, of a bit of sort of darkness or a bit of sort of self-doubt or, negative feelings in that regard. And it's amazing how I've found running helps that, and how a moment where I'm feeling a bit exasperated, I can go for a run and come back, and the problem's minimised. So
you were really drawing, more than the physiological aspect, it was that psychological, well documented, and as we both know as, passionate runners, the psychological benefits are enormous. And I think, Clay, this is a really pertinent point. Men, don't often talk about this, this stuff and their feelings and emotions, but whether you're male or female, the benefits of running psychologically are enormous, as you're stating here. You mentioned, mate, the year of yes. Is this something that you routinely do? You put a word around your year, or was this just a special year? Just a special year, because we knew we were only there for 12 months, and we thought, we really want to make the most of this. We don't want to squander this opportunity. And, it just worked out so well. We sort of started playing ultimate frisbee and really doing things we wouldn't normally do, like hiking up mountains and whatnot. And around that time, there was a lot of adventure races in Canada. And one of our friends said, well, we need someone to run in a team. You run every day to school or around the block. Do you want to join our team? And it literally started from there. I ran pretty well. So this is in Canada, and when you say you ran pretty well, you mean to your own expectations, or you podiumed or took out this event? I don't think we podiumed originally. I think the real wake-up call was I did a half marathon there towards October of that year, so it was late in the year. Again, I had no idea about training. I think I was running as hard as I could, as often as I could, to get ready for this half marathon, including the day before. I think the day before the half marathon, I think I ran 5 or 10 Ks as hard as I could. Just ridiculous training when I think of it now. God, I had no idea. And I think I ended up running a 1:18, I think. I'd have to check it, but it kind of exceeded expectations, and because I remember I was aiming to finish. Wow. And this is what year approximately, Clay? This is 2010. Definitely. 2010. Okay, so 7 years ago. So you've since gone from a 1:18 to around a 1:10, 1:11. Correct me there. Yep. On your half marathon PB. Which was it? Sorry, Clay. I
It's hard to say. I don't know many of my not many runners are like that, but I don't know many of my PBs under marathon at the moment. I'm a bit dogged with my marathon PB. I think it's around 1:10:40 or something.
So we'll go with the 1:10:40. So you've dropped the 8 minutes on the half. When was your over these 7 years? When was your first marathon, Clay? Put listeners in perspective. So you've dabbled along. You're running. You realise it's enjoyable for the mental benefits. It's also you realise that you got a little bit of talent there, and you're running a 1:18 with no expectation. Take us through to your first marathon. When did that happen and where?
I had a bit of success since coming back from Canada, just with 10Ks and fun runs and stuff. But my first marathon was, I was training with a good mate of mine, Matty Kasos, who was a kind of a pseudo coach and was doing a great job with me. And he pitched the idea. There was the Blackmore's Sydney Marathon, was the Australian Championships, and he said, look, maybe you should have a shot at applying to run for Queensland. Even though you hadn't run a marathon before, maybe they'll pick you in the team and you'll get to fly down there and you'll have a bit of purpose and it'll be a good little debut. So I did, and I was lucky enough that I was picked in the team and ran pretty well, all things considered.
So what'd you run, Clay? First marathon debut, you came out and ran a what?
I'd have to check, but I think it was a 2:32 something. 2:30, maybe a high 2:32.
That's an incredible debut. And what year was this, mate? This was what?
Gosh.
5 years ago? 4?
Yeah, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, I think.
So 4 to 5 years ago. So to do a 2:32, you're off the back of some decent training. I mean, you were running, regular volume. What were you doing? What do you think were the secrets there to bust out a 2:32 on debut?
Really conscious speed sessions and that routine of 2 speed sessions a week and basically getting out as often as you can. I've tweaked that since then, but that seemed to work at the time. Well, that was the only thing I knew, and it's what a lot of people do, and successfully. Yeah, definitely. I replicated that because I did 8 marathons after that, and I replicated that for pretty much every one of them.
So 2 key speed sessions and getting out as often as you can. 8 marathons later, and that first one was at Sydney, did you say, or Melbourne? Sydney.
Yeah, I remember, blubbering like a baby, running into the Opera House there at the finish. I guess a lot of your listeners marathoners would be able to testify that first marathon's quite an emotional thing. I'm sure you could, sympathise with that.
Clay, I've mentioned on the podcast before that, mate, I get emotional at the end of any marathon, whether it's been a good one or a not good one. I think it's just the absolute sheer exhaustion and the sacrifices that are made leading up to it. So mate, it hasn't just been my first one. Maybe I'm just too tear happy.
No, I have to agree. I'm very much the same. We're cut from the same cloth, mate.
So Clay, let's talk about this year. There's been 8 or 7 marathons or whatever it is in between 8 marathons, but this year, you've joined up with Peter Reeves, who's been around the running world for some time and an incredible performer himself, and. Leading into the Gold Coast this year, I'd read that Peter thought you were around in the 2:27 territory, and you've come out with a 2:26.54 to take the Australian and Queensland Masters title. We're the same age, Clay. I think we're both born in 1980, 36 years of age. Is that right?
Oh, I'm 81. But yeah.
Sorry, mate. I'll put another year on you, so I'll detract that year. That matters. So you've come out, run an incredible time. What was it like running down that chute at the Gold Coast Airport Marathon, seeing that time up on the clock?
It was a really unique feeling. Like you said, I sort of hooked up with Peter Reeves, who's definitely a physical coach in terms of training routine, but he's so much more than that in terms of a friend and more of a mental coach. Where I always suffered from a bit of anxiety before races, and we sort of dealt with that. And being aware of what your training's for. So coming into the home straight, I remember having a fair bit of disbelief. I was aiming for sub 2:30, and that was always the goal. So to come around the corner and know that I was going to do it very, very easily was quite a memorable and emotional moment. But there was that moment of there was something different about it. I sort of it was it's hard to describe, but there was a bit of confidence in there that I think that coach put in me.
And Clay, you said you suffered from anxiety, before races. What sort of drove that? Was that your internal pressure on yourself, or fulfilling other people's expectations of you? Where was that coming from, or is that something that you've sort of had through your life? Because I can relate, Clay. I remember as a junior triathlete being so nervous, I felt like vomiting and no strength in my body at all. It's changed as an adult, but it's almost disabling, the level of anxiety I used to have.
Yeah, and it was very much the same for me. It'd be a week before the race, and friends and my wife would notice the difference in me and say, "What's wrong? And I go, I just had this utter pit in my stomach and anxiety about, I guess, not performing to expectation, or failing, or not being able to finish the race, which is all ridiculous for anyone who's trained for an event. And it would be to the point where even for a park run, I would be super nervous before that.
Yeah, wow, even a park run. And so you've run down the chute, 2:26:54. What was the first thing you said to Peter after this? What did he say?
I searched for him, but I couldn't find him. But I was certainly, when I saw him, I think it was at training that next Tuesday, or at least on the internet, I said I was very appreciative, to say the least. I think. Yeah, and like I said, it was 8 marathons. That was my 9th marathon. So 8 marathons where they were all between 2:40 and 2:30, and I just couldn't break that 2:30. And then, he steps on board and helps me get there.
Some powerful principle there, isn't it, Clay? What other differences did you make, though, aside from assigning or putting Peter in your corner? What other differences did you make practically with your training to knock off those few minutes? More volume, less volume, more easy runs?
Yeah, that's it, more volume. And being very conscious of my body during the training as well. So coach was very insistent on not overtraining in terms of new speed sessions. Instead of doing the ridiculous over-the-top speed sessions where you absolutely ruin yourself for the rest of the week, he had us doing just enough. So you'd be able to get up the next day and do a long run, or push out a 30K or 40K long run on the Sunday easily enough at talking pace.
And Clay, what was your volume on average leading into it? I mean, were we talking 150 plus, or how high were you going?
We were trying to hit that 180K mark, and for next year I think we're going to aim to crack the 200 in the 8 weeks leading up.
Yeah, so that's some serious volume. Your long runs, you hinted there, were up to 40Ks a week. Yeah. So how many weeks in succession? This is just really practical, Clay, but I think listeners get so much out of this stuff, the real practical nitty-gritty. So, I mean, would you do the 40Ks, hit that once, build up to that, or would you sustain that?
Hitting it twice.
Hitting it twice.
There was one in particular, one really memorable race where we had normally we just sort of plod along, but we had Isaias Bain, who's another in-training athlete who is an amazing marathon. I think he's got a 2:11 PB. So he came out for a run with us, and there's a bit of a language barrier there, so we couldn't really understand what each other was saying. But it was one of the most magical moments in running. It was about 5 a.m. down the main street of Ipswich. There was no one anywhere, and the rain started drifting down, and we were about 2 or 3 Ks from home, and we've just done 30 or plus Ks. And he looked at me and he had this glint in his eye, and I looked at him, and we just took off together and ran the last 2 Ks at I think about 3-minute pace or something. Nearly died, but it didn't cost him anything. He was laughing. But it was just one of those moments where it was lightning in the fingers moments, and I always think of that as a good indication leading into the marathon that I was going pretty well. Yeah, wow.
And I know Isaias, and he's a fast and beautiful runner. Mate, what pace were you doing your long runs at? Were these, apart from the 3-minute K pace when Isaiah teamed up with you, but, were you bowling around? Were you looking at heart rate? Were you looking at your pace on your Garmin, or were you just running by feel?
Running to feel, yeah. A lot of what coach goes by is we're sort of disciples of the Pat Lahesi school of training very much. So we run very much to feel, and we sort of worship the ground that he walks on, to be honest. But so a lot of those long runs were running to feel and just getting the kilometres down. Looking back now, I mean, I tend to train. My comfortable training pace during the week is around 4 minutes.
Yeah.
4:10s I'll do a daily 15, 16K run, and it'll generally hovers around there for me to be comfortable.
And Clay, you just mentioned Pat Kalesi, that your words, you worship the feet, the ground that he walks on. What are the, for the uninitiated, the listeners, give listeners a bit of an insight into this sort of school of training. What are the key principles?
A lot of it is routine. It's that dripping tap principle where you've got your routine workouts during the week for your speed sessions. There's always for us at least, there's always a Tuesday speed session. We do that barefoot on the grass at Ipswich, and everyone's welcome. And also Thursday we do a speed session. With Saturday we have a tempo effort, and Sunday long run. And the other days of the week are just comfortable running to feel or slightly longer effort on a Wednesday. And that's it.
In those Saturday tempo efforts and Tuesday speed sessions, are you rotating through a couple of different sessions, or are you doing the same one each week?
Generally, we rotate through a couple of different sessions, or a few different sessions, just depending on the season, I guess.
Yeah, and leading into the Gold Coast, what was your most memorable, when you ran your PB, your 2:26.54, what was your most memorable speed session, Clay?
I remember, I certainly remember the sessions involving 400s, feeling very strong during those. And I'm not a fast runner. I've got anyone who knows me knows that my running style is not something to emulate. I've got this really short, fast cadence. So the long, beautiful strides that I look at runners like Alistair Stevenson and all of the Olympians. Al's a local and a good mate of mine. But I look at those guys and their beautiful running strides, their Mo Farah-esque long strides and that nice posture and stuff. And I just think my stride is completely in odds with that. So I'm not a fast runner. But those 400s they felt really good, and I felt like I was running pretty fast.
Yeah, nice. And how many were you doing, Clay? Put us in the exact, and what break were you having? We always roll through these as fartleks. So there's always a fast run followed by a jogging recovery. That's always the case with us. And generally the speed session itself is about 5Ks. 6Ks of effort with a good 7K warm-up, maybe 7K cool-down, sort of getting close to 20Ks a session, or 15 to 20Ks a session with 5Ks of effort. Yeah, so it's decent volume, but with that really high intensity patch in the middle. Clay, mate, so amazing result, the Gold Coast.
Thank you.
You turned around 4 weeks almost to the day later and ran the Brisbane Marathon, of which you took out a victory there in a great time, another sub 2:30, 2:28.15. Did you have your doubts that you'd be recovered leading into that? Was anyone saying, Clay, take more time? Historically, and generally a lot of people wouldn't back up that quickly. What was driving you to that? And were you going against your own intuition, or put us in what was going through your head to tackle that one and run so well?
The goal from the start of the year was the only goal for this year was to try and break 2:30. So once I did that at Gold Coast, it was like all of the pressure went off completely, absolutely out the window. So there was no mental pressure there at all. There was no expectation. I was going in the run purely because it was I'm sponsored by In Training, who run the event, and they gave me a free entry. So I thought, well, why not run it? You're young. I don't know how often these opportunities come up. I'll take it. So I did that, but I definitely wasn't expecting a sub 2:30. I'd done the Kokoda Challenge a couple of weeks before that, which is a 96K trail walk. So that took my school team of teachers, I think, 26 hours. So that wasn't an ideal lead up for a marathon either.
And for listeners that aren't familiar, this is on the Gold Coast, the Kokoda track, which is how many Ks? 96, I think, Clay?
Yeah, they advertise it as 95, but my Sunto gave me 100 Ks for it.
Yeah, so you did that, and that was only how many weeks before Brisbane?
I think that might have been 2 or 3 weeks out, 3 weeks perhaps.
Maybe it was a perfect recovery, Clay, post GCAM, post Gold Coast. Who knows?
It's highly likely. But I didn't stop running in between any of the marathons. I didn't have a day off at all. And there were a few 10K races in there and 5K races and stuff as well, which is something I'd never done before as well. I guess you asked what was different. That was something that's a bit different as well.
Oh, wow. And so you win the Brisbane Marathon, 2:28:15. The bit that I just am so amazed with, Clay, is 2 weeks later, you go a bit further north up the road, up the coast, and for overseas listeners, we're talking about the state of Queensland, the Gold Coast. Brisbane's 1 hour north, and then the Sunshine Coast is about another hour north. And 2 weeks after you win in Brisbane, which was 1 month after your PB on the Gold Coast, you ran another 2:27:30 to take the win on the Sunshine Coast. So, mate, This is unprecedented. I couldn't believe it when I saw it.
I am still very much in disbelief. I'm waiting for somebody to sort of pinch me and say it's a dream, or some race official to come up and say, hey, we directed you the wrong way and you missed half the course or something. I don't know how it makes sense, really. Even coach before the event said, if you run a sub 240, that's an amazing achievement. So neither of us were aiming for a 230. And I remember just, again, that I'd already achieved more than what I'd even dreamed of. So entering that race, I knew there was a couple of mates in the event, Dion and Clary, if they're listening, from down south. They're amazing runners. So I thought there was no chance I could hold a candle to them. So I just ran comfortably and had fun. I was chatting to the pace bike for a good 20 Ks.
And you know, the old adage, you're only as good as your last race. Well, you're a little bit, gosh, you've just had two stellar 2:30 runs. You know, you'd been trying for years to crack the 2:30, and you've done it in a month with the Gold Coast and Brisbane. Were you a little bit hesitant about, oh, gosh, if I do run a 2:40, I kind of feel like I've taken a backward step? Or what was your intention? Was it just to have fun and who cared about the result?
Yeah, I guess it was. It didn't really cross my mind as it being a failure. I knew that if I finished the race, I would have been happy with that. I guess I would have been disappointed if I'd run plus sub 240, which sounds ridiculous even as I say it. But I was just trying to really honestly not think too much about it. And one of the techniques to dealing with the nerves that coach has given me is he uses the analogy of not worrying about the gunfight while the gun's in the holster. So he says you can wait until an hour before the race and you can get as nervous as you want in that hour. But generally what happens is that hour before the race you're too busy getting ready, so you don't really get a chance to be nervous. And I guess I used that for Sunshine Coast. I just didn't really think about the event. I went up there to see some friends and go for a nice run, and it worked out well. And
it was a nice run indeed. And then since Sunshine Coast, have you taken a bit of time off, or have you run right through, Clay? We're now in the month of October.
I've taken 2 days off a couple of weeks ago for I got a bit sick, so I took a day off, and actually coach had me taking a day off yesterday, which was pretty unprecedented. He's got a ridiculous record for continuous running. I think it's in the years and years and years. Dare I say 17 years? I'm not sure.
Wow.
Either way, for him to tell me to take a day off, I think that's high praise. That's what I read into it, at least.
Wow, that's incredible. And how do you feel taking a day off?
Yeah, it felt a bit sluggish. I ran with the pram today, my first day back, and it felt like the pram had the brakes on. But yeah, I feel good. There's no niggles in my body. I'm as good as I could ever be. I'm a bit disappointed I didn't have a tilt at Blackmore's this year and try and get the 4, but there's always next year.
Well, mate, so is that the vision, the dream, to go for the 4 Pete, the 4 sub 230s?
Yeah, maybe. At this stage, the goal is to try and beat that PB. It's the eternal goal of every runner, I guess. Every athlete is to beat that PB. I always try to sit back at the end of the year, and occasionally just sit back and be appreciative. Because there was a time when I was in Canada, and I remember looking at the elite runners and going, wow, I wonder what it would feel like to run a 36-minute 10K. And I thought, if I could just do that once, my life would be complete. You always raise that bar, and I'm sure, and occasionally I have people say, wow, you're a really fast runner, or, congratulations. But, to me that sounds ridiculous because there's a million people faster than me. That's the way I sort of feel about it anyway.
And I think that's the beautiful part of the humbling part of running, Clay. There is always someone faster. There's always levels, and I think that's there's just a nice self-reflection to know that's the case, and I think it keeps the egos out of the sport. I really do. Mate, let's do a performance round. So let's pull apart a little bit of your performance world. Training session you most dislike, Clay Dawson?
At the moment, I'd have to say mile repeats. And that's very similar to what Bernard Legat said on your show too.
So how many miles are we talking about? How many mile repeats are we talking about?
Not many. I think we do maybe 4 or 5 mile repeats, but it just always seems to fall on those days where I'm feeling particularly flat, and 4 laps is a long way on that track. You're not feeling well.
And what recovery are you having, Clay, between the mile repeats?
400 float recovery.
Yeah, and the miles repeats would be on what sort of time, and what would your recovery time end up being with a float?
I don't know. They wouldn't be terribly fast. I'd have to check my Strava to find that.
Will you be forgiven for not running them as fast as Bernard Legat? Mate, training session you most love?
I'd have to say the long run, and just for the purity of it. It takes me back to running purely for fun, and running purely just to enjoy and explore and feel blood in your veins and air in your nostrils and throat. And I think that's the purest session, and I really enjoy that.
Pre-race meal, how does Clay Dawson fuel up before these sub 2:30 marathons?
Oh gosh, you're gonna hate this. The night before is just whatever makes my stomach comfortable. So generally it's just like a nice sort of grilled chicken sandwich or something that I'd regularly eat. But the morning of the event, I always have a Gatorade, and I find the sugariest donut I can find, and I eat that with a banana.
Beautiful. What sort of donut are we talking about? Anything?
Just the absolute diabetes-inducing 7-Eleven style.
And brilliant, mate. Bedtime, morning time. Are you pretty? You've got your young son Jasper. Are you pretty disciplined around that, or are you a bit more casual? You've got a full-time job you're holding down as well there at Rosewood State High, I think it is.
Yeah, it's Rosewood State High. It's a bit sporadic, unfortunately. I'd love to say that I get to sleep at 9:30 every night and get up at 6 or whatever, but it was particularly during the last year, it's been pretty incredible the amount, because Jasper wasn't a great sleeper, and I was trying to get my runs done I was getting up at 4 o'clock every morning, and it was a bit hairy throughout the year.
Mate, the life of athletic parents. Who's the athlete that Clay Dawson most admires and why?
Oh, wow. There are so many. I'm inspired by so many people in our community, to be honest. And the beauty of the community here in Queensland is that there's so many everyman runners. And I'm inspired by so many. I'm inspired by the previous guests like Cassie Fiend and Pat Tiernan, and the athletes that inspire me the most are those ones who are around the era where I've been running, because I haven't been a fan of the sport for my entire life. So I don't have. I mean, I grew up watching Moneghetti, and I know, and Deeks is obviously a god. But most of my current idols are the athletes who I've run with and seen from very far back behind, like your Liam Adams and your Marty Dents and your Craig Mottrams and all of those sort of athletes.
All the good Australian folk.
Yeah, the Australians, the Al Stevensons and the likes. Yeah.
Toughest competitor, Clay, you've ever raced? Who and why?
I'd have to say Al, actually, just speaking of. I remember one particular, I was thinking of this question, and there was one particular time when I used to go for warm-up runs, and there's this fabled Brisbane institution called Sherwood Runners at Sherwood, which is a suburb in Brisbane. There's a park and there's a 6K loop and a 4K loop and a 2K loop, I think. But I was doing the 6K loop once, and I did a warm-up with Al Stevenson, and he said, I was just going to take it easy. And I took off because I really wanted to win this and have a good run. And it was an out-and-back course of the 6K, so I hit the 3K mark and turned around, and I had about 400 metres on Al, and I saw the twinkle in his eye, and he kind of gave a half smile, and I thought, oh, yeah, it's on. And I hammered it for all it was worth, and he caught me like I was standing still, zoomed past me, and about 200 metres before the end, peeled off, so he didn't cross the map. And I think it was a case of him just the older, experienced, more capable runner just letting the young, excitable pup know his place. It was a really special moment. It's something I always appreciate.
You mean he didn't cross in front of you? He let you take it through?
Yeah, he let me win. Sort of ran off the side. He ended up beating me by about 200 metres, and I gave everything for that.
Wow, isn't that that's a special memory? Listeners, I hope you're enjoying Clay Dawson. Today's episode, as always, is lovingly brought to you by POGO Physio. We exist to help you get back to your physical best following injury. We want everyone who walks through the doors of POGO Physio to cross their physio finish line. What's a physio finish line? That's simple. That's where we high-five you, tell you that we love you, but you've finished rehabilitation and you don't need to come back. We've got some unique ways that we provide services, including the finish line programs, 2, 6 and 12-week fixed fee unlimited access, including active rehabilitation and all hands-on therapies, and now including our wellness boosters, which have been remarkably popular for our patients or our clients seeking to go from injury back to their physical best. The wellness boosters are simply fixed fee but limited services for a month, and they're very popular and very suited to a wide range of conditions. So jump over to pogophysio.com.au, check out the wellness boosters and the other array of services, and we'd love to help you get back to your physical best. Let's jump straight back to Clay Dawson. Is there a mantra, Clay, that you use when you're racing or competing?
There's not really a mantra I use per se, but I do tend to break the runs up into small sections and make little sort of bargains with myself and just, use a bit of positive thinking during the race. So I'll try and think about what it will feel like to cross the finish line or getting myself through to this next section and then, the relaxation after the race and knowing that if I stop now, I'll regret it for a lot longer than if I push through that pain barrier.
Best recovery tip, Clay?
The best recovery tip is I've tried a fair few things, but I'd like to say a bit of good massage is great. I've got a good masseuse, Trevor Highlands out at Ipswich, who helps me out, but I'm partial at the moment to running through. Going out the next day after a marathon and running for even 10 minutes, 20 minutes, as slow as it takes, but just keeping those muscles moving over, and that seems to work really well for me.
Or just back up and run another sub 2:30 a few weeks later. I thought you might have said that. Clay, worst injury to date?
My 2016 was a polar opposite to 2017, where I had a recurring hamstring injury all year. I ended up stubbornly doing the stupid thing and not taking the required amount of time off and coming back thinking that I was healed when I wasn't healed. And it got to the point where I had to go to a doctor, and they found 3 tears in my hamstring, my right hamstring, and that carried on all the way through the year. And at the same time, I think I was having a nose operation. So that was a pretty horrendous year. But that's been the only real injury I've had is the hamstring.
The nose operation, you're a good-looking bloke, Clay, but I don't believe that was cosmetic surgery. Was that sinus-related, or are you at liberty to say?
No, I don't have the amount of money to fix my face cosmetically. But it was a septoplasty, because when I was a kid, I caught a cricket ball with my head and broke it back in primary school, and I never really thought anything of it until I went to the doctors for the hamstring injury. And they sort of suggested that because I had cartilage blocking one of my nostrils completely, that I could get that fixed, and I did. So,
but what was the catalyst for the doctor looking at your hamstring to look at your nose? Were you reporting that you were snoring, or that you were lacking sleep, or what?
I kind of forget how it really happened, whether it was just an informal conversation or, yeah. But it was 2016 was my year of hospital wards, that's for sure.
Did it make any difference to performance, Clay? Were you able to sleep better, breathe easier?
Yeah, I've found that the sleeping's been a lot better. The biggest difference I've found is through the flu season. So when I get a blocked nose or a sore throat or a combination of the two, I'm not relying on,
just the mouth.
The nose isn't taken out of the equation completely.
Yeah, and so listeners, don't think that running sub 2:30 marathons requires septoplasties. Clay, one word to describe your racing style.
Oh, one word. Unorthodox.
How would you describe being in the zone?
Being in the zone is perfection.
The last time you were in the zone?
I would have to say the last 200 metres of that Brisbane Marathon.
What was going through your head as you were about to cross that line?
Well, that was the first marathon that I had run in front of my son. So I knew he'd be at the finish line and to win, which was something I'd never considered. And even, it's stupid, when I'm horrendously bad at maths at the best of times, but even at the turnarounds on these marathons, I can look at the person behind me, and even if they're 2 minutes or 4 minutes behind with 2Ks to go, I fool myself into thinking that they're just behind me. So it's only till about 200 metres to go that I actually, realisation kicks in and I start to realise that I might win it. So for that race particularly, tears were streaming down and knowing that, even though he might not remember it, being under 2 years old, but I'll remember that always, crossing the line and seeing my wife and seeing my son and all the training and all the lead up and everything just poured out of me. That was a very emotional moment.
Mate, that's so special. Clay, two final questions on the performance round. What's the funniest thing you've ever seen while out racing or training? While out training or racing?
Oh gosh, there's been a lot of crazy. I haven't been in the sport for a long time, but I've seen a lot of crazy things. I was trying to think of something particularly funny. I've had friends that have happened across people copulating in parks and all sorts of harebrained things like that. Probably I've been winning a half marathon once, and the pace bike looked at his GPS watch and went, "Oh, we're going to run a bit short," and took me off on an extra block. That was a bit of an interesting experience, not knowing if I was going to go from 1st to 10th or whether anyone was going to follow us. But I think something that I find particularly funny, and I don't know whether it's because I'm delirious on a long run, but there's a park near us in Ipswich on one of our running loops. I train with a group of informal runners with Peter Reeves called the Nancy Runners, and we run a loop called the Rust Bucket Run. And there's a park in the middle of nowhere, literally amongst an industrial estate, where they've gone to the trouble of putting up swing equipment and playground equipment and fencing it and turfing it and making this beautiful little park, and then put up this sign that says, in bold council writing, temporary park. So we always run past and joke about the councillor temporary and how the park was named after him and stuff like that. So that always tickles me during a run.
And for overseas listeners, they're having a good chuckle at the Australian names. What was it? The Nancy Runners running at what park? Rust Bucket?
Yes. And the Nancy Runners, I think, is a bit of an institution now in itself. We've got some fantastic it's just a pure, beautiful running group. Founded by friends who collectively get together and run for fun. I think it stands for naturally athletic, cultured. I'd have to look it up. Hang on. Nurtured culturally in Ipswich.
Yeah, beautiful. And you are a proud and fine ambassador for the city of Ipswich, Clay. I'm talking about buckets. What's on Clay Dawson's bucket list, both inside sport and outside sport?
I'd really like to nail this parenting thing. I think that's number one. I see this little person every day, and I kind of I can't love him anymore. I think he's amazing. He's a blessing. So I kind of want to do everything I can to make his life as great as it can be. Just like my parents have done for me, I guess. But the bucket list in terms of running would have to be to just keep pushing, seeing where this choose your own adventure is going to end up. Really.
Mate, that's fantastic. Have you got an unction, Clay, of how far you can get? Where do you think this marathon PB can get to? Do you want to be as courageous as putting it out on public record?
Oh gosh, that's a bold prediction. I might just at this stage try and get the low 220s would be great. I'm not making any grand. There's too many great runners in Australia to even think about Commonwealth Games or even getting the qualifying time. I enjoy watching them from afar. But yeah, I like I said, I used to think running a 36 10K was near on impossible. So anything's possible. It really is. I just hope that at the end of it, when we're all shuffling at age 90, we're smiling, and yeah, that'd be good, I think.
Brilliant. Clay, of your years of being inactive and now active and performing incredibly well at an elite marathon level, what's the one bit of advice you'd give, Clay, to listeners out there looking to perform at their physical best across a whole range of endeavours, Clay, not just running? What would Clay Dawson's solitary piece of advice be?
It would be to find the thing that you really enjoy doing and get a bit selfish with it, I think. As well as sort of believing in yourself. I always tell the kids at school have no idea about my running, and I kind of really like that. I have this sort of degree of complete anonymity with the kids, and I always tell them when I occasionally let a kid know that I've run a marathon on the weekend or something, they go, "Wow, you've run a marathon? How far is that?" For 42 Ks. 42 Ks. And you say, well, 80. How many thousands of people run the New York Marathon every year? Do you think every single one of those people is better or worse than you? Is better than you? Then, you start to get those cogs turning, and you've got to look at everyone around you and realise that you're really more capable than you give yourself credit for.
Powerful principle, isn't it? There's always more. Clay, fun question as we bring this in to a close. 3 people at a dinner table, Clay. You're a regular listener of the Physical Performance Show, so you know where this is going. Who's at your dinner table and why?
Oh, gosh. Oh, wow, this is really difficult. I'm a massive stand-up comedy fan, so I'd have to say I'm a huge Arj Barker fan. I'd love to have dinner with him. It'd be remiss of me not to choose some runners in here. Robert De Castella would have to be there. Oh, gosh. If I could sneak my wife and my kid in together, that'd be good.
Yeah, mate, put them together. That's fine, Clay. We'll let you off with that.
Thank you.
No, that's a dynamic table, Clay. Physical Performance Challenge. Every guest issues one. What's Clay Dawson, who is an elite marathoner and also a full-time school teacher, juggles also being a caring, loving dad? What's your physical challenge of the week going to be?
It would be to find your nearest park run or the nearest 5K sort of social run, and bring someone, a friend, hopefully, along with you. And just once, that's the challenge for this week, I think.
Clay, that's very practical and I think very doable. And so, listeners, if you take on Clay Dawson's challenge, tag us in on social media, give us some proof of doing it, or just let us know that you've done it. Clay, where can we find out more about you and follow your journey?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram. If you search Clay Dawson, you'll find me there. I'm also on Facebook and Strava, of course. So I'm always happy to let people in on that. Yeah, that's probably the easiest way to find me or follow me, that's for sure.
And listeners, we'll tag those up on the show notes, so jump over to pogophysio.com.au and follow the show notes there for those links. Clay Dawson, you've got the opportunity to tag a guest for the Physical Performance Show. Who would you like to see as an upcoming guest feature on the podcast?
Oh, gosh. Who would I like to see in the running community?
It could be any physical performance, Clay.
Let's go. I'd love to hear Liam Adams, to be honest. I'm very interested in that guy. I'd love to hear his story.
Well, Clay, you'll be pleased to know that one is in the vault and going live. So you get a second chance here, Clay.
Oh, really? Oh gosh, tough. Lee Troop, actually.
All right, so Lee Troop, if you're listening in, let's get this one done and tick the box for Clay. Clay Dawson, what most people probably don't know, apart from those that are really close to you in your world, is that you mentioned your affinity for comedy. You've also got, I believe, a bit of a comedy routine that you're working on. Let's round this out with you taking us out with a bit of a joke.
Oh God, that's a massive stitch up, mate. I haven't done comedy in a couple of years. It's brutal. I entered raw comedy 2 years ago. I did it for 2 successive years and got hammered both times. So I think your listenership would be massively diminished if I went on the record as trying to make people laugh again.
You must have a running joke, Clay.
Oh, I don't, unfortunately. I think my cadence is the best running joke I've got.
Well, listeners, did you hear about the runner that ran behind the car? They became exhausted.
That's brilliant. So you're talking there, mate.
That's dad joke, mate. So Clay Dawson, absolute fantastic to catch up and get under the hood of what's been a remarkable year for you, incredible year, and those times are times that many people dream of, and so to run 3 in quick succession, absolute standout. And thanks for sharing so openly on the Physical Performance Show, and on behalf of myself and all the listeners, we wish you all the best for 2018 and beyond, and I think there's plenty more of your best running to come.
Gosh, I hope so. Thanks, Brad, and thanks for everything you do for the running community. I'm a massive fan of the podcast and you in general. Like, we've been mates for a while, and I just think it's amazing what you do, and you're a great interviewer. So thank you.
I'll stick to the interview and I'll leave the comedy, Clay, for you.
Cheers, mate.
So listeners, there you have it, another episode of the Physical Performance Show. I trust you enjoyed today's episode featuring Clay Dawson. If you did, please let both Clay and myself know. You'll find our social media handles over at pogophysio.com.au, along with a copy of the show notes. If today was your first time tuning in to the Physical Performance Show, a massive welcome. And if it was your 90th time, then thank you for your ongoing support. If you enjoyed the episode today, you've just been enjoying the show in general, then please consider, particularly across the break at the end of the year, leaving a review for the Physical Performance Show. Reviews really do help this program get into the ears of more listeners who, just like you, are looking to pursue and perform at their physical best also. It's really simple. Jump over to your laptop computer or your desktop, click iTunes and click away with a rating for the Physical Performance Show. 1 star if it's okay, 5 stars if you've been really enjoying it. And this week I just want to say thanks to Katie E. Katie rated the Physical Performance Show 5 stars, and Katie's comments were, "I absolutely love the Physical Performance Show podcasts. I look forward to them, and I have re-listened to many of them while I enjoy a long run. It is inspiring to hear the insights into the lives of elite athletes and other professionals in the sporting field. Keep up the good work, Brad." Katie, thank you very much for taking the time to leave a review. And listeners, aside from leaving a review, another way that, it really helps... Sorry, Daz might edit that. And listeners, aside from leaving a review, another way that I would appreciate if you've been enjoying the show would be to share it with anyone you know who would be interested. So simply click share from your phone or your device and tag the URL into someone that you know will appreciate it and enjoy it. So thank you for sharing it around. So listeners, there we are, another year, 2017, done. And a massive thanks to all the great guests we've featured this year. And next year, we have a great lineup coming your way. We're kicking off the new year with some big name guests, and we're looking to also build in our expert editions as we go in 2018. Listeners, next week on the Physical Performance Show, we take a bit of a look back at the year that was 2017. We review some of the highlights, some of our favourite stories from the incredible guests that shared their performance insights across the calendar year of 2017. So be sure to tune in next week for a review of some of the favourite stories and moments of the podcast from 2017. Until then, keep pursuing your physical best performance. I'm Brad Beer. This has been the Physical Performance Show. See you in 2018.